Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Superficial Spirit. Thanks again for joining me. I love doing this podcast. It was just my birthday a couple days ago, November 11th, Remembrance Day. So, really hard to forget. No excuses next year. I want a flood of love, which I actually did get on social media, which is really nice. Um, and I was like, what can people give me online? And I see a lot of people do charities, and I think that's great. I didn't ask for money for a charity. I asked for people to tell their friends about my podcast, to like, subscribe, and leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. Um, I'm so satisfied with the way that the podcast is growing and the messages that I get. And I was interviewing somebody yesterday who is also a podcaster, and we were talking about how saturated the market is and how, there's a tipping point with anything that's kind of like new and fresh. Like when social media first started and you had, such easy or get, oh my gosh, I just realized that I look so scruffy in the mirror in the video. That's okay. Um, when I first started Facebook, I it was so easy to build an organic audience. I was doing music at the time, and I felt like as soon as I posted my video, it was everywhere. Like it really, really spread really quickly. And promoting parties was like that back then. You could invite everybody on your friends list. It was really easy. I think the intent of social media was to connect everybody organically. And I think that for a long time it did. And I think the same was with podcasts when podcasts first came. And I've listened to a few stories about, people who were in the really early phases and how, there was such an abundance of listeners because it was a new medium. And a lot of the early podcasters would cover so many different things like true crime and music and movies. Like it was sort of like every week they would do something different. And now it seems like everybody has a podcast, and just like everybody has a YouTube channel and everybody's an influencer. And I think that can be intimidating for people who are maybe creative and looking to get going, but also, and that's what it was for me. Like I was always wanted to do something on YouTube. Like, oh my God, if I would have gotten on YouTube back in 2008 and 9, when I was really in my club kid days and I was going out all the time and I was my life was, wild. There was wild things happening, and I would have like started vlogging that. I know I could have built a following because I look at YouTubers and I know that I have a similar quality that they do, but I was just, I don't know why, lazy, intimidated, who knows? But I sometimes get in that head frame when I think about my podcast. On good days, I'm like, oh my God, I can totally see this growing so much. Like the feedback is great. And I do feel like I have a niche. I am exploring spirituality and mental health, but I'm also incorporating pop culture. And I think those are two really popular topics and spaces that people seek out in these social media formats. So on good days, I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. One of my goals is to do a live Superficial Spirit where I interview people live. I would love to do one in Toronto where I live. I'd love to do one in Calgary where I was born. I would love to do one in Vancouver where I lived for 10 years. And I'd love to do one in LA where where I also spent, when I was 19, I lived there and I just stood outside clubs waiting for celebrities. And I think I just want to do that again, even though the people that I followed back then aren't really famous anymore. Well, they are, but I mean, I don't think, you know what I mean? That was like 13 years ago. But it can be intimidating, the whole social media thing. And I'm also going to be doing my first live tomorrow on Instagram with Rex Brody, who is a big fan of the podcast, a good friend, and somebody who's got some great perspectives on the topics we discuss. And yeah, I feel like it opened the door for me. So I don't know why I started this huge rant about social media. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I'm still enjoying the podcast. It's been approximately 6 months since I started. Definitely has been the gift during the pandemic and all this craziness. Oh, yeah. And for my birthday, I wanted more people to share it. Like, if you like this podcast and you listen to it all the time, please stop what you're doing right now and text a friend and be like, look, I got this amazing podcast, this really, really cool celebrity, super famous queer guy named Peter fucking Breeze, and tell them to listen to it. And, if you are listening to it and you have some ideas or guest recommendations, please let me know. I have gotten a few on Instagram. I haven't gotten back to the people yet. So if you sent me a message, I will get back to you. But I like that. I mean, I really am committed to this. I told myself no matter what, I'm going to give myself a year to see what I can really do, because I think a year is a good indicator for any type of project to at least have a good start. I'll have lots of metrics to look at. I'll have a bunch of guests under my belt, and I can really assess what I want to do next. So thanks for tuning in. If you've been here since the beginning, thank you. If this is your first podcast episode of the Superficial Spirit that you're listening to, welcome, Haney. What do I want to talk about today? I mean, I just did a lot. So the guest that I'm talking to today, I actually already interviewed, and oh my God, I forgot to press record. Oh my God, I felt so bad. I finished the entire interview and it was so great. This was a couple weeks ago. And when I ended the call, it normally uploads the audio and the video, and it just wasn't recording. So it was really disappointing, but I'm excited to have her back. I've known her for many years in Vancouver. We used to throw parties together, and she was a drag performer. And we had a really interesting conversation on social media recently on Instagram when Adele lost a bunch of weight. And we got into the conversation about fat icons in pop culture. And I wanted to talk to her. I mean, it's just such a cool topic that I personally have not engaged in. And I feel like it's important and it's relevant. And I can't wait to talk to her again. And I feel so bad that I didn't delete it, that it didn't record. So anyway, without further ado, please welcome my dear friend, Lauren, formerly known as Anappropriate. Lauren from heaven. Oh.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm so good. I'm trying to figure out. So I am in Surrey today. It's a full house with 5 people.
Congratulations. Okay, great.
And I'm on my mom's computer because I forgot my computer. So she thinks that people are spying on her through her webcam. So I'm just going to figure out how to turn on her webcam.
I think I might be able to do it for you. Oh, no, I can't. That is so funny, though. Oh, my God. I love people. I love old people.
Okay. I don't think it's going to be too difficult.
That's so funny. You know what? I don't blame her, though. Like, I definitely... Every time I'm looking at the dirty stuff, I'm like, somebody's watching me and I know it.
Your FBI guy assigned to you is like, Peter.
This is a case
This
for the
again.
FBI. You should just be able to do it through the Zoom call, I think.
Okay, just give me 1 sec.
Yeah, no rush. No rush. Oh, okay. Who's this? Oh.
Okay, let's give this a try.
Oh my God, a real angel on earth. Oh my God, how are you? Yay!
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you, you sweet bean.
Oh my God. And I just have to say one more time, I'm so sorry about last time.
Oh my gosh, don't even worry.
Oh my God, I was just so devastated. I felt so bad. And yeah, I'm so sorry. It was the first time that it's happened to me, and I'm actually glad that it did, because now I know, and I'm looking at the screen now, it says recording, but it's crazy. Yeah, shit like that happens. And I know that you're an understanding person, like you're not going to hate me, but I wanted to say sorry again.
Oh my gosh, you don't need to say sorry, because I loved it so much. Literally when you were like, can we do it again? I was like, Yes. I'm so excited to do it again. So
Good, I'm
like
glad.
zero hard feelings. I was like, oh, I get to spend a little more time with my Peter.
Yes,
I got some lash extensions.
that was gonna be my very first question, honey.
Yeah.
The lashes, I love
The
them.
the people gotta know.
I think they look great. When did you get them?
Thursday, it's my first pair. It was
Okay.
great. Except they take your eyelid and they stretch it over a piece of paper, sort of, and then
What?
they
What?
so it feels really weird if you're not used to it because like they basically just like squeeze your eyelid together and then do the extensions.
Okay, that sounds terrifying. I mean, that's
And
like something you see in a horror movie.
she kept telling me to relax my eyes, and I was like, I don't know how to relax my eyes.
Oh my God, I never want to experience that. When I was 16, I got a small part in a movie, and the role was like I was basically dying on a hospital bed, and they were like trying to bring me back to life. Yeah. Wow, groundbreaking. And they had to clamp my eyes open for this one scene. And I remember I was 16 and they're like, Peter, we just want you to go to this doctor to do, they want to do a trial run of the eye clamp thing. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, I just wanted to be in the movie. I didn't fucking care. Andy Garcia was in it and Angela
Mhm.
Bassett. And so I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll do anything. And so I get to this place with my mom and they're showing me this clamp and I'm like, first of all, they put drops in my eye to numb my eyeballs, which you don't think you feel your eyeballs until they're numb. And then
Yeah,
they clamped open my eyes and it was very, very fucking crazy. And when you see the pictures, it was just like my exposed eyeball. Um,
that's
yeah, and
horrifying.
my mom was like, this is not a movie. This is child pornography. I don't know what they're doing with you. Like she just went tailspin. My mom was just like scared of everything. My mom, oh my God, my mom also went for her first massage ever, like in the past year. And she was like, so I finally went for my massage. No, she told me she was going and I followed up and I was like, Mom, how was the massage? She's like, well, I went in there and I met the guy. First of all, it was a man. And then he talked to me in the room and he said, okay, I could take off my clothes. And then he left. And so my mom snuck out of the building because she thought he was being inappropriate by asking her to take off her clothes. And I was like, Mom, that's what you're supposed to do. And she was like, oh my God, it was so rude. I was like, oh my God, Jesus. She also, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking so much
I
about,
feel like they might have the same.
she went to go to a therapist appointment and it was in somebody's house and she didn't
Mhm.
realize that. And so she pulls up, it's nighttime, the lights are off, and she's like, I can't go in there. She calls me hysterical. Peter, why is it in his house? What if he locks me in the house? Why would somebody have? I'm like, Mom, lots of people work from home, but it's like these irrational fears. It's so funny. And I think like if she ever got the fucking eyelid paper thing, eyelash extension, it would not go well for her.
I
Crazy.
think we have the same mom.
Maybe it's like everyone's mom is irrational. Anyway, I digress.
Mhm.
So I loved we just to bring things back a little bit because the reason why we started talking about this conversation was because um, Adele lost a bunch of weight
Mhm.
and it was all over social media. There was these crazy, well, I mean, they weren't crazy pictures, but they were it was like, oh my God, that's Adele. It was
Dramatic.
shocking.
Yeah.
Dramatic, thank you. And you were posting a bunch of things to your story about, you know, the narrative around these women who lose a bunch of weight in the media and how we react to it. And I was like, holy shit, that is an
Mhm.
interesting part of pop culture. I've thought about it because when you see that kind of dramatic transformation in pop culture or in any kind of situation, of course you have a reaction and you're like, this is not the person. This person looks completely different now. And how does that change my relationship with them? And somebody like
Mhm.
Adele, Heartbreak Diva, all the love songs, and now suddenly she has this dramatic weight loss. She's thin and she is looking completely different. How did like my brain was like, oh my God, where does she fit into my, mind now? And
Mm.
after talking to you for just like a sliver on Instagram. I was like, okay, I need to like be more educated about this conversation because, you know, just like Black Lives Matter and learning about trans stories, anything, it's easy to stand on the sidelines and just sort of register something in your mind and move on. And I wanted to talk to you about, you know, your story, because you used to perform in Vancouver all the time, as well as a hyper queen. And, you know, how you see yourself in the media and then relating that to somebody like Adele. And then when there is like, you know, a dramatic change like that, what you are interpreting.
Well, I think one of the most important things is that I don't want to pick on one specific celebrity. Like, I don't want to pick on Adele. And I think actually big kudos to her because she actually hasn't commented on her weight loss, which is huge, right? Like, it's her body and it's not anybody else's business. And body changes are normal, right? The only thing that's regular about our bodies is that they change.
Yeah.
And so there's no shame in deciding to change your body or stuff happening. I think where it becomes challenging is that is the one of the only narratives for fat people, is that it is not okay to stay fat. And when you think about Adele, like someone like Adele, who is like just an incredible star, incredible personality, child, husband, millionaire, like one of the most talented singers of our time, the idea that it's still not enough is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not just her. Like, if you think about just about any fat celebrity, and a lot of people, like, when we spoke, Peter, you were like, do we say curvy? Do
Okay,
we
I was just gonna
say
say,
like
because oh my God, yeah, the word fat to me sounds like a bad word, to be completely honest. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know if I want to say it. And the same way, my ignorant ass, when I moved to Toronto, and there's so many more Black people in Toronto, and I worked with a bunch of amazing Black people, and I was scared to say Black because I don't know, I just didn't know if that was the right word. And it's same with fat, like anything that is outside of my personal thing that, you know, you've heard in a negative context at some point in your life, you're like, you know, I love you. I want you to feel like, I don't want you to feel alienated by the words that I say. And so, yeah, last time we spoke, you were like, fat icons, fat celebrities. And I was like, are we saying fat? And you're like, yeah, that's fat. That's how you identify. That's how you use the word you use to describe yourself and these people. So yeah, that word it makes me nervous, to be honest.
Totally. And it's because you're a perfect angel and you want to be respectful. And I just appreciate that so much. I think that's lovely. Um, it's definitely a word reclamation, right? Because, like, for some reason, fat is up there with some of the worst things you can say about someone. When it's just a state of being in a body. Like, why is that as bad as like being cruel or corrupt or nasty or like all of those different things? It's and it's not something that everyone uses, but I think more and more people are using it. And it's something that, like, especially fat folks who are new to the body positive fat liberation movement can be really anxious about. So I find that, like, the more that you see people destigmatizing the word fat, um, I find the better that it is, because it isn't a negative thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people might not think of it that way, which we'll talk about later, but it's not a negative thing. It's just the way something looks. And I work with kids, right? And kids are often asking questions about your body when they're trying to ask questions about their bodies.
Oh,
Um, so I had a kiddo, oh my gosh, she's so cute. I had a 5-year-old say, "Why are you so big?"
wow.
And I said, "Oh, like, are you asking about my height, or are you asking about how fat I am?" And she said, "No, you're so beautiful."
Oh my God.
And
Oh
I
my
said,
God.
"Did you know you can be fat and beautiful?" And she said, "No." So, like, that's still the narrative that kids have. And it's just those simple conversations, because once you establish that, it's like a non-issue.
Yeah. How do you get to that point though? Because You know, growing up, now I can say I'm gay, I'm queer, and it's just a word that I use, and it's lost its weight because I've grown into myself. But growing up, hearing
Mm,
the word gay, I was like, oh my God, it was just like, they know, they know, they know. And queer too.
mm,
Queer specifically was more of a nasty term. So how
mm-hmm,
did you? What's the journey of like being called fat and it feeling shameful, or it instigating that kind of reaction, and then now where you're like, yeah, I'm fat, that's the word, it's not bad, and
mm-hmm.
let's take it back.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a similar journey where I think being able to connect through social media with other fat folks is really important because you want to see yourself in other stories, right? And that's why media is really important. And I think I think sometimes we can kind of shrug it off as like, oh, it's just, you just it's pop culture, it doesn't matter, but those are our cultural stories, right? So I think part of the issue is that when you're young, especially like our age, right, where we didn't have cell phones in high
Yeah.
school, um, I didn't have any fat icons or really fat people in my sphere, right? So that word was really hurtful. And
Yeah.
like there's certainly teasing and bullying and ideas even from like your family of origin about like, if you're fat, no one's ever gonna love you, or if you're fat, there's A, B, and C that's gonna happen, or that it means that you're lazy or that you don't take care of yourself or you're not healthy. Um, so yeah, that's especially why like fat celebrities are important. And when you think about like sort of any fat celebrity, like how many can you think have either had weight loss surgery, which is incredibly dangerous, life changing, that doctors will recommend to non-celebrities as a solution, kind of a coverall solution to problems in
Ugh.
your health and body. But like I think about like Missy Elliott, I think about
Yeah.
Oprah, I think about
Oprah,
um,
yes. Anna Nicole.
Anna Nicole, a big one, Anna Nicole, like Jennifer Hudson,
Jennifer Hudson.
um,
Roseanne, way back when, Roseanne.
Roseanne. She's come back to the to the light side. Well, she's come back to the fat side, not the light
Just
side.
coming back to the back. It's yeah, like I think there was too, like my perception of those people growing up was like Missy Elliott was an enigma because she was a
Mhm.
woman and she was a rapper and she was fat. And it was like, those are three things that I was like, I don't know what to do with you. Um,
Mm,
but also loved the music. Like she, to me, stood alone. And I don't remember having specific thoughts about her being the size she was, but
mhm,
I don't know. She did that garbage bag music video and she was like, yes, I'm fat and I'm also going to be garbage. Which I mean, I've had
so
sense of
great.
ownership is so fucking awesome. And Anna Nicole, she had that shameless quality too. I mean, I think now we know how sad that journey was. Like now that we know
Mhm,
how that ends. But you know, in her reality show, it was all sort of indulgent. That was her. She was
mhm,
like, I'm going to eat, I want to have sex, I want to masturbate. And it was that no holds bar way of living that I think so many people identified with, especially queer folks, because we're like, oh my
mhm,
God, she's a cartoon. But then she
mhm,
lost all that weight and it was like, you know, she looked so quote unquote good by Hollywood standards, but then I felt like she lost some of her magic at the same time. And then she started
mhm,
spiraling. Like it is interesting because only fat celebrities can have that journey of like
mhm,
up and down, Oprah, up and down her whole career. And how, I mean, Oprah, God bless her, every time she was losing weight, she was trying to get her audience on board and like committing to it being the last time and like Weight Watchers. And, you know, she was so, if you read any of the books, biographies unofficially that have been written about her, that was
mhm,
her biggest struggle. You know, she would go to hotels and eat a bunch of pies because she'd feel so much shame. And
mhm,
what that narrative one says to the public about these people that you love and you see them go up and down, and then what that message is like being perpetrated in your brain because we celebrate them, but do we love them in the same way?
Oh, I love that. Do we celebrate them, but do we love them and do we care about their well-being?
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I think that's a great point. Like there is so much research that is coming out now that diets do not work. Things like The Biggest Loser, they don't work. Even weight loss surgery, people gain it back. Like I think, especially with dieting, I think I shared that folks that I've connected to have a similar story to me where they were like maybe like 8, 9, and 10 when they first started Weight Watchers. And it
Oh my
just creates
gosh.
this whole lifetime of disordered eating. Because at 8, 9, 10 years old, you're being told that you're too fat and that that is the worst possible outcome for you. And some folks, it was suggested to me to go to a meeting, and I just was like, it sounds like torture. But folks have told me that, they were kids and they would go to these Weight Watchers meetings where you get weighed in front of everybody and you talk about your accountability and your struggles like you're going to AA.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like AA. It's shame based because you're
Hmm.
talking about how bad you were and how far you've come since the person you were, and it's counting time and probably counting calories and number. It's all that, like, there's an end point and you have to move past it. And if you go anywhere that they perceive as backwards, like if you've been sober for 20 years and you have a drink, it's a relapse. You start from zero. And I feel
Mm,
like that creates a sense of tension and shame and pressure. And I imagine it would be the
hmm,
same with weight loss. Like, you're weighing yourself in front of people and, it's that accountability, quote unquote. But what does that really do?
hmm. So rather than like having a healthy relationship with food and like an intuitive relationship with food, it turns your relationship with food upside down. And I think like that's sort of the narrative, right? Like I also think about Melissa McCarthy and
Uh,
Rebel Wilson, who have also
mhm.
lost a ton of weight. Rebel Wilson also on her Instagram, um, she was showing pictures of her weight loss journey, and she was working with a doctor that had like electrode pads on her temples and was doing like nasal therapy, like crazy stuff. And it's not a negative thing that the body changes, but I think this narrative that you can have it all but it's not enough, and you fat is never a place to live,
Mhm.
is is really dangerous. Especially because the narrative is also like, so magazines and blogs will interview celebrities, and it'll always be the same story of like, my life was out of control. I felt so horrible. My life was trash fucking garbage. And then I lost the weight, and then my life turned around. I'm happy now. And like, we know that life doesn't work like that. Weight loss does not fix all of your problems.
Yeah. Yeah, but it must be intoxicating. Like, I want to
Hmm.
know how you perceive those stories. Like, when you are, that to me, like, sobriety, to connect it to something that I can relate to. When
Hmm.
people would say, I got sober and my whole life got better. When I first stopped drinking, I thought what that meant was I would stop drinking and I would become famous. Like, you would get
Mm,
everything that you
hmm.
wanted because that was the story. Everything bad is in drugs and alcohol, everything good is in sobriety. And
Right.
now I'm like, I think there is a gray area for a lot of people. For some people, no. For some people, really no.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
there is a gray area. And I'm wondering, when you are identifying with these fat celebrities and they start going to the weight loss side and they start opening up about how crazy their life was and how much better it is now, what is your personal experience when you're reading and seeing that?
Hmm. It's really like that. It's not. So first of all, it's not okay. Like the way that your body is not okay. It's bad. And you cannot have a good life. You cannot be loved. You cannot be successful like as you are. Like that really is the messaging. And it's so intense that like when I see that, like I have unfollowed folks on Instagram, or I've avoided stories about them, because it is honestly something that's hurtful. And it's not hurtful that their body has changed. That's okay. It's the narrative around it is the thing that's hurtful. Staying fat is not an option. in that narrative as celebrities, because you don't have it all.
Yeah. Ooh, God, that sucks. It just seems so toxic. My friend Darcy Michael is a comedian. He's from Vancouver. You may have met him, but he
Mm.
has done a bunch of TV work, and he was like the fat stoner. That was his character.
Mm.
And his agents didn't want him to lose weight. They're like, no,
Yeah.
don't lose weight because that's your brand. And he really struggled because he's interesting because he did say there was a transformative quality about the process of weight loss, but it also pushed
Mhm.
him to an extreme that was not healthy. And then you have the identity, your identity is confused. You lose sense of who you are because body is what we see, right? And it doesn't
Mhm.
always reflect the inner world or our state of health. I mean, that's another point is, the healthy side of your body is not something you can always interpret just by looking at someone. And that's something
Mhm.
you said last time that I found really interesting is, people talking about the emotional quality of losing weight is one thing, but then, everyday people just interpreting fat as unhealthy, period.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's also research coming out now, especially around BMI. I think a lot
Mhm.
of people might be able to relate to looking at up their BMI and having
Yeah.
it be in this like dangerous death zone. So BMI is incredibly outdated, and also does not take into account a ton of different factors
Wow.
um, around your body, right? So there's sort of like pictures that kind of go around virally that are like these women are like, I remember there was like a weightlifter and a shot put, both athletes, and like their BMI was in like the danger zone, but it was because they were so muscular, right?
Interesting.
And they were tall.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that BMI takes that into account, but so there's um, some doctors call like that anti-fat movement as pseudoscience.
Hmm.
Um, and I think like kind of to summarize like this whole conversation, I think it's really important to talk about like a definition of like what is fat phobia? Because
Mm.
it's really not just like the body positive movement of thin women kind of like bending over. So there's a roll on their
Right.
Instagram being like, I love myself, which is actually wonderful. I love that you love yourself and your baby roll. It's so lovely and cute and you're perfect. But
Yeah.
um, it's really about like fat liberation, which was a movement in the 60s and 70s around some
Okay.
other civil rights movements. And when you talk about fat phobia, it is the like economic discrimination, which like can be like you might not make as much money, you might not be perceived as working as hard. And I know that that is something
Uh,
I've experienced.
what?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely been passed up for people that have not performed in the same way but are thin.
Oh, I'm so
um
sorry to hear that. That makes me so sad. That sucks.
Medical discrimination. There are so many folks that have complex medical stuff going on, and doctors are often very dismissive of as like, oh, if you just lose weight, like this is going to go away. And so folks end up having illnesses that are undiagnosed for so long because it's dismissed as like they call it diagnosis fat.
Hmm.
And there's another piece where a doctor will, uh, if you're seeing a doctor, some doctors will say, well, you can have weight loss surgery, and not getting to the core of what's going on. I
Yeah.
remember going to the hospital because I was having a back spasm. I was a breech baby, which means your legs are coming out first.
Oh, God. Woo!
Like a slip, no, not like a slip and slide, like a water slide, sort of. Um, and I remember I got my blood pressure taken, which was great, by the way. But I remember the nurse wrote in like capital letters on my chart, obese.
Oh
And
my
I was like,
God.
I'm just here
It's like
because
a
my
sticker.
back hurts.
Obese. Oh,
I was
God.
like, I see you. Um, um, the way that it also plays into like desirability, discrimination in terms of, even like in terms of like outright like hatred and people being abusive towards you, not being able to access different spaces. There's also a continuum of like of not everyone knows this, but there's sort of a continuum of like small fats, which is closer to like the body ideal. So
Mm-hmm.
small fats are sort of around like six, like maybe like a size 14, 16. And
Mm-hmm.
you go from like small fats to like medium fats, and then there's large fats, or people call themselves super fats or infinifats.
Oh my God, Infinifat. That would be me.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, negotiating like physical space, like being able to access like a bus or airplane seats or like seats at a hospital, that kind of thing too, right? And people look at that as, well, you have personally failed for being this size, so you don't deserve to get on an airplane. You don't deserve to have a seat that accommodates you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the medical thing. Like I want to go back a little bit to like
Mhm.
diagnosis fat and that nurse sort of putting obese on your card or whatever she put it on. Where does that fat equals unhealthy come from? And if it's not true, what role do we need to play in order to get past that? Like what I'm hearing is sometimes being fat is unhealthy, sometimes it's not. And it's not up for the person to look to assume, just like a
Mhm.
person's skin, assuming a person who is thin or muscular is in shape. That is definitely, or
Mhm.
sorry, is healthy. That is not
Mhm.
true. So, when it comes to the medical world and people's perception of health and fat and how that works together, where do you think that comes from? Like, why is it so hard for the world in general to move past that fat equals unhealthy?
Mhm. I was just looking on my phone here because I wanted to make sure that I got this right. So there's a writer named Sabrina Strings. She's a Black woman who wrote a book called Fearing the Black Body.
Okay.
And a tremendous amount of work in anti-fat phobia has been done by Black women and women of color, because they are disproportionately affected by fat phobia for sure. And what she talks about is that fat phobia actually, and like the slim body ideal, predates any um, notions around body size equals indication of health, by about 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And what she talks about is, that when the public were thinking about Black folks, there was these incredibly negative stories and stereotypes around the fact that Black people are overindulgent and they can't stop eating,
Uh,
and or they are hypersexual. And so that was kind of personified in, like, you can see um, sketchings or paintings of people of color um, with like over exaggerated um, like breasts or butts or tummies, and that indicates that they are all of these like moral things that folks have prescribed to fatness and Blackness. So like laziness, overindulgence,
yep.
like being immoral, being wrong, being not being quite human,
Ugh.
right? So it's interesting to kind of see that all of these notions, first of all, are rooted in racism,
Yeah.
um, and second of all, predate any ideas of fat equals unhealthy. And and it's a complex issue, right? Like I can't say that I'm an expert, but I think my advice would just be for folks is, if you have a doctor who is dismissing you, it's really difficult with our medical system sometimes, but you have to find a doctor that's a fat ally to you. I'm really lucky to have a doctor who has told me I'm healthy. She always sort of
Yeah.
makes a point of being like, you're healthy. And I've heard that from multiple doctors, right? So I always think it's important to like, we understand ourselves just as our being, our individual, but really, like, I think you talk about a lot, we're people in a culture, right? We're people in a society. And um, it's, I always kind of take a look at the person as a person in a structure, and how does the
Yes.
structure affect that person rather than the individual.
Yes. Yes, I remember you saying that, and it really got me thinking about. I am so hard on myself, and I it's really hard for me to make
Mm-hmm.
decisions. And I now I'm getting more clarity about like where is this idea about myself coming from, and it's
Mm-hmm.
either from the media I'm consuming, the groups that I go to, or friends. And I think it's a really good point. Like you need to surround yourself with people who are enforcing. Positive reality for you and base
Mm-hmm.
that is based in reality, not yes people who are like, yes honey, shoot up, that's okay. It's not that. It's like, no, you need to seek out the people who are going to lift you up. And with
Mm-hmm.
doctors especially, oh my god, like you have to be able to go to the doctor and get that clarity. Because if you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting it from the streets, I mean, like when I say the streets, I mean like day-to-day life, your workplace, your friends, nightlife, then you are going to go home and think, well, my doctor's not even telling me, so it must be true. I must not be healthy. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's so important to get that clarity. And another interesting thing that you said is negotiate, like public spaces and space in general. And
Mm-hmm.
more recently, we've been having a lot of these discussions around washrooms and gender, and how we need to be more inclusive when we're creating public spaces. And I haven't heard that around fat people and size.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I mean, there's a thing with gay boys and fat girls. I don't know. We're
Mm-hmm.
like, we're linked forever, and we have great bonds. All my friends growing up were big girls, fat girls. And we talk about airplane seats and things like that. And I get so much anxiety because I'm like, what? Or going to the theme park, going on a roller
Mm-hmm.
coaster. And
Mm-hmm.
what role do you think, we're talking about trans people, in terms of all the types of people, it's a small percentage of the population, but that doesn't mean we don't give them what they
Accommodate,
need.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Same when it comes to body sizes. What role do you think is the public and I guess our governments and society's role to play to make sure that we're accommodating size specific spaces?
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that sort of came up for me is like when we talk about, just to backtrack a little bit, when we talk about health, there's also this like moral imperative to be healthy, right? Like I always think about like the Vancouver sort of stereotype of like slamming rails on Saturday and then like waking up to like a chia acai bowl and then like going
Uh,
and doing the grind.
that was me. That was me,
Yeah.
minus the chia and the grind. It was just slamming lines. Oh, I hope my mom's not listening.
And so like there is this like moral weight that's put on health, right? Like and of course like it's a really positive thing to be healthy, but like there's all these moral and sort of um like the quality of person you are is indicated by your health,
Yeah.
right? Um and I think like it's difficult for me to understand why there is a resistance to making the world accessible for different people.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to like, so it can feel so distant now, but like in the mid 2000s when we're talking about same-sex marriage
Oh, yeah.
and queer marriages, where people are going, no, absolutely not. And we see that with like all sorts of different issues where it's like it doesn't affect you, as if you're not a queer person and you're not going to, how does a same-sex couple being married affect you? How
Yeah.
does having a larger accessible seat on an airplane or an accessible seat in a theme park or in a medical hospital or like in restaurants, right? How does that affect you? And you think about the averse thing, right? The averse, like if we don't have a societal inclusion for trans people or a societal inclusion for fat people, what is the actual lived experience for that person? It's awful. The amount of shame and exclusion and isolation.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think absolutely it's a responsibility that we have. There's also this, like, when you talk about even things like poverty, right, which is also, I think, viewed as the state of becoming, right? And that's because, poverty is something that causes people to suffer. But there's this idea that you have to pull yourself up by your
Oh,
bootstraps,
fuck.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you need to figure it out. And that lacks context, right? Like exactly what you were talking about, Peter, is like Peter is a person in a context, right? Peter growing up
Yes.
is a young man in a cultural, societal context. And it's the same for um, any kind of identity, right? Is that it is not as simple as, you know, just don't be trans, or just like don't maybe be gay, but like don't show it. You don't
Not
need to
too
get
gay.
married.
No
Not too gay.
sparkles.
Yeah, not too fat. Oh,
Is there something else I can help with?
there's a lot you could help with,
Who's that
Siri.
down there,
That was
Lauren?
Siri.
I know, I'm just kidding.
I have a house of 5 people right now. You never know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's like when you think about it, we assign morality and goodness and badness to just about everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. And I think that when you're talking about why it's so hard for the world to accommodate everybody, I think it comes down to that, like, public officials and people in power, celebrities, people we see in the
Mm-hmm.
media, needs to be a better mirror. It needs to be a better reflection of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if we had more gay people in power, the marriage thing wouldn't have been an issue for so long. Same
Mm-hmm.
with fat people, Black people, anybody. I think when those people are able to make decisions and they're in a position of trust instead of being in poverty, and where people
Mm-hmm.
are constantly seeing the same story, they're constantly seeing the same people in poverty, they're constantly seeing the same people struggle. And unless you see a difference, it's
Mm-hmm.
really fucking hard for these people in suburbia who see the
Mm-hmm.
same thing every day to bend their mind a little bit. And, in some ways, yeah, Evan and I talk about this a lot. If you live in middle America and you've never met a gay person in your life, it is
Mm-hmm.
going to be scary. You only know what your parents have told, which is, I don't know, gay guys eat poo. That's what they like. Who knows what they've been told? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't know a human being behind a label, it is
Mm-hmm.
really easy to keep it in a scary place. And I think for me, what has helped me become more comfortable with myself is when I went to nightlife and found my sisters and other gay boys that were
Mm-hmm.
exactly like me, and the drag queens and stuff. And then seeing people in the media become more and more male identifying and flamboyant helps
Mm-hmm.
me feel more and more comfortable with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to see our stories projected back to us more. But then again, it's like, who's going to do that? It's up to those people to fight
Mm-hmm.
hard to create those stories. And then again, it's kind of like the poverty thing. Well, if you don't like it, change it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. It's
It's
hard.
yeah, so you like, and just the ability is, and it's difficult because it's not as accessible to like youth and kids,
Yeah.
right? But being able to see a whole variety of different stories for um like queer and trans folks, right? Like if you want to be married and have 2.5 kids and a picket fence, it's not as easy as it would be for like a white, well-off, able-bodied man.
Yeah.
um but it's possible, right? There's kind of like a buffet of stories now. And I think that's what every person wants, is an ability to be able to basically to dream for yourself.
Yes.
The other piece the challenging piece is because there is more and more plus size fat representation in terms of clothing availability. When I was in high school, I
Mm.
remember going to the mall with my friends. I couldn't really shop anywhere. And I remember, oh, what was it called? I think it was called Talbot's, but it was like a store for fat grandmothers. And I remember, and it was like full of like blazers, like oversized blazers. And I remember being like, thinking that because they were blazers that was like really refined and adult, so I would go and shop at the grandmother store because there was nothing else.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So especially with clothing, it's certainly not the same, but like um I think about like the Savage X Fenty show.
Yes. Yes.
Like there is more a combination of like plus size fashion. People have realized that plus size people have money and will spend money on clothing.
There you go. Fat dollar,
Whether or
honey.
not it's the same quality as the straight size line is always a question.
Yeah.
But so when I look at plus size models on clothing sites or websites, the challenging thing is that it's still trying to be as close to the body ideal as possible. And there sort of is this new body ideal that's coming, Peter, like the Kim Kardashian look,
Uh-huh.
where, and it's interesting that these different fads of body size and body shape and body appearance, it's always something that's incredibly difficult to achieve.
Yes. Yes.
Right? It's so interesting. So, you know, in the 60s, we had like the Twiggy image, which was incredibly thin and waveish. Then we had Kate Moss in the 90s,
Yep.
and now we have Kim Kardashian.
Yep.
I think about the Kardashian thing that's interesting, though, is that like you have to sculpt your body almost, like some people are very blessed, but other folks, like there are fat grafts to your butt, breast jobs.
Oh my God. Like if, yeah, it doesn't, you see Kim Kardashian, like, yeah, see, even this is an example of like, how do I talk about her body? But it's like, it's not my place to do it, but it is not an easy, body shape for people to achieve if they're not born with a big butt or big lips and a big boobs like that. And then they go to like, she has her skimwear and they have contour, like they're basically drag queens with their makeup, and they paint their entire bodies, their entire bodies. And what is that message? I mean, we've come so far in some ways, in terms of equality and acceptance and inclusion, and then we at the same exact time we're idolizing this family who literally are clowns, essentially, like completely transformed with plastic surgery, whether or not it's actually under the knife or just injectables, you know, wigs, contours, all of that. So, you know, we're like, wow, they look amazing. But the thought really, a better approach would be, wow, they have a lot of, they put in a lot of work to look like that. A lot
They
of
have a
makeup
lot of
artists and
money.
they have a lot of money.
And that's the thing about, like, that's something I think about with like celebrities who lose a large amount of weight, which is not in itself a bad thing. Like, I think one of the cruxes of body positivity is it's your body, it's private, you do what you want with it. And, you know, there's no judgment. But I think like one of the stories is like, you know, we don't think about, you know, when we think about maybe Adele losing a lot of weight, we don't think about the fact that she has enough money to pay for personal trainers every day,
Oh,
the
full-time
best of the
job, yeah.
best, someone to cook for her, someone to clean for her, like all of these things that maybe more regular people don't have. I wanted to mention that like I was reading some articles about how one of the most common surgeries that plastic surgeons are seeing in the States is tummy tucks and double chin reductions for plus size models.
What?
Yeah, so I was talking about this the other day because I was just feeling very self-conscious about my double chin because it's something I'm not seeing
Okay.
in sort of the plus size influencer and like model world, is the double chin. Like people like Tess Holiday have talked about having you know, cosmetic surgery done. And again, it's your body, you do what you want, but we're still trying to approximate this body ideal in like plus size models and people who are fat, who are supposed to be trying to be more representative of like people's lived experience, but it's still not. So there's still an element where people aren't seeing themselves in plus size models. And again, if you are shopping on if you're looking at like Torrid or different websites to buy plus size clothing. The models are more often than not going to be like a size 16 or 14 or 12. So we're still not seeing fat bodies in their reality.
Yeah, it's still like a modified version of what the reality is when you're looking for that type of clothing. And it makes me wonder if there is ever a healthy way to look to pop culture to see yourself and to find validation, because I have found so much inspiration in celebrity culture and nightlife and that crazy, wild, superficial world really, really inspired me. But you have to be really careful with trying to like regurgitate that in your daily life, because most of the stuff that you see is just not real, period. It's just not real. And without money, without the editing, without everything, it's too hard to emulate. And so in a perfect world, we would have that literacy where we could consume it and be like, wow, that's a really great image, but then like shake it off and move on with our lives. But it's too hard. I mean, we are constantly consuming it, and you don't see yourself, you don't see someone with a double chin, then that is a message. That is a message. The lack of presence is saying something. It's just like when people don't speak about Trump, they're saying something. When celebrities don't say something, that says something.
Yeah, I think about like, so when I look at like in like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example, when I look at a character like Chris Pratt's character, I just think like, why did Chris Pratt have to get fucking shredded? Why did he have to like, I feel like that character could easily have been Chris Pratt in Parks and Rec.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Like
he was so hot in Parks and Rec.
A little bear.
Yeah.
And I think like we talked about when we spoke before, like whose responsibility is it to increase representation, right? And I think like it's not just one person's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility, right? Because Chris Pratt is told by the studio that he needs to lose however much weight and have this exercise and eating regimen, right? I think like on every level, there needs to be education for like kids around different kinds of bodies. There needs to be education for people that are pursuing like medical stuff, like a medical career. There needs to be practice put in place to be reflective of our lived realities.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm thinking now, and this is something we said last time, was when people lose a bunch of weight, it's like, congratulations, good for you, blah, 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 blah. When people get sober, we're like, congratulations, good for you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, we're not ever celebrating middle of the road, like people who are just not anything but themselves. Like I saw a headline, like, would we be happier if we just accepted we were average? And the answer for me is fucking yes. Fucking yes.
Absolutely.
If I could just accept that I am just who I am and I'm getting better, oh my God, the anxieties, the things that I could have let go of my life would be so different if I didn't have this insatiable appetite to be something great. And so many people have that. That's not unique to me at all. We're constantly being told rich, famous, greatness, being a guru, being an influencer is what you need to strive for. And, we don't celebrate people who are just living their lives, getting by, have great relationships, but also struggle. That is what life is. It is more gray. It's not black and white, but we celebrate the black and the white, the extremes.
And it's like, what are you exposed to? Because as I like, so entering into young adulthood, I thought that like, because you are fat, no one will love you. And I think people have an idea in their head, and I think about like also, although it's not the same, like sexualized racism, and desexualizing fat people, especially desexualizing like fat women and fat women who are people of color or Black or Indigenous. It's also really important to note that like Black, Indigenous folks and people of color also experience fat phobia in a different and more intense way. Because all of these moral characteristics that are put on fatness are put on additionally because of race. So you're A, B, and C because you're fat and because of your race. but like, I think if people were just free to live in themselves,
Yeah.
and like, I know that I sometimes like there is people are surprised by what they find attractive,
Yes.
right? And if we were just free to like have this range of things that we're attracted to and we're into, like there are people that are ashamed to be attracted to people who are fat. And you
Yeah.
see, and like, and it's interesting in the queer community where there seems to be a lot more liberation around like that. Like the bear community has its own issues, it sounds like, from what I understand, in terms of racism and
Yep.
transphobia and stuff like that. But it's interesting to me that there's a space for that in queer culture. There isn't so much of a space for heterosexual culture, when really, like, there is such a rainbow of things. Humans are so sexy and creative. Like, to put ourselves into the box that if they don't look like Kim Kardashian, we don't want them, is crazy. And we, like, each of us lose out.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I'm thinking about this time, speaking of bears, when I was at the pump jack and I was walking by this fucking man and he slapped my ass so hard and I was instantly turned on and it surprised me because I looked at him and I was like, what the fuck? Like, not what I would have considered my type, but also the whole spanking thing. Like, it was just a chance thing that happened in a club that was like, oh, maybe that's something I want to explore. And in terms of like, you know, the type of partner people want, so many people get caught up in what their partner needs to look like and what they need to
Mm-hmm.
do, and they miss out on these really amazing, emotionally satisfying and healthy relationships because they don't look a certain way. And I don't know how you move past that. I think social media helps because you're exposed to more, almost
Mm-hmm.
accidentally. Like, you might not be seeking something and then a picture comes up and you're like, ooh, what's that? You know, like, Lizzo, I think, does a good job of like sharing her life and her success, speaking out, and her body. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is, when I see Lizzo, you know, twerking naked on Instagram on her private island or wherever it is she goes, it feels like a relief, because like, shameless. Why shouldn't Lizzo be doing exactly what
Mm-hmm.
fucking Britney was doing in the 90s?
And it's interesting because there's such a backlash for Lizzo. There's been so many articles written, just being like, is Lizzo too sexual? Is she sexualizing herself too much? And it's like, I do not see a single difference between the way that Lizzo is sexualizing herself versus Ariana Grande versus Lady
Yeah,
Gaga versus anyone else.
yeah.
But I think there was an incident where uh P. Diddy and Lizzo were like sharing a frame. I think, I don't know if it was a televised thing or if it was an Instagram thing, but Lizzo started twerking and P. Diddy was like, cut it, cut it, cut it. And he didn't want that to happen. Um, so
Oh
like, so I think
no.
we still have a ways to
Oh
go in
God.
like viewing fat bodies as sexualized and desirable. And I think like one of the best things that we can do is educate and also be aware of like our cultural biases and be able to call ourselves when that happens.
Yeah,
Right. So, and
yeah,
so there's like this thing that's called like internalized fat phobia, right? So maybe I have in my mind an idea of like what a partner should look like. And so I think we have a tendency to like just immediately be like, oh, that person is this, I'm not attracted to them. But if you
yeah,
take just a second and like be in your awareness and be like, oh, do I think that because that's a cultural story I've been told that this kind of person is this, so they're undesirable?
yeah.
I remember reading, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I remember reading that part of the desexualization of like Asian men was around um, like one of the wars, and that like there were more men coming over from the East, and like women were very attracted to them, and so like the hegemony of like white, you know, able-bodied, well-off straight men was like, oh no, like this is
Not
being
gonna
taken,
happen.
yeah, this is being taken from us, so let's smear this like category of people.
Ugh. I was It reminds me, I interviewed somebody a couple weeks ago about how they have a podcast called Conspirituality, and how they have an episode about racism in the wellness community, and how the
Mm,
gym culture was actually born out of the white men fearing like their bodies were becoming too soft, and the black men who were working were big and buff, and they
mm-hmm,
needed to find a way to compete with that body type. And so gym culture came from that, at least in part.
mm,
And it's funny, like, how many things in our culture go back to racism? Like, it's fucked.
so
It's so fucking
much. Yeah.
crazy. I want to know what you think about, because there's been a lot of reality shows over the years that are about weight loss. You mentioned The Biggest
Mhm.
Loser. Um, there's
Which
also
like is an insane title for a show. Back in like, do you remember like the Wild West of reality TV where it was just like do whatever the fuck you want?
yeah,
with
yeah.
like with like Flavor of Love, Strange Love. There was like some show where like women thought they were dating a millionaire and then they fall in love with them, and then at the end they say
And
he
they're
has no
poor.
money. They're poor. There was another show, I think it was more recent, but it was like it was a bachelor type setup, but it was like an English guy that kind of looks like Prince Harry, and then all these women are competing to, oh, I think it's called I Want to Marry Harry, and all these women are competing to date and marry Prince Harry, and then at the end they find out he's not Prince Harry.
Oh my God. The WB Superstar was like that, where it was a singing competition and the people were awful. The premise of the show was, we're gonna tell bad singers that they're amazing and
You
take them
told,
all the way
oh,
to the end. Yeah. And
that's so fucked.
it's still cringeworthy. You can go back and watch how awful, like, oh my God, I can't even imagine what that would do to somebody. But then you had, remember The Swan, where people got head to toe body plastic surgery and then went into a beauty competition?
I literally block out the Swan. Like I people have brought it up to me throughout the years, and I feel like we talked about it like a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and even since then I forgot completely about it, and you just told me about it. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
But
awful.
like the lived reality of the Swan too is nuts. Like, again, it's saying that you as yourself in your body, you're not okay,
Yeah,
and there's something wrong with you.
yeah. What do you
And if we
think of,
can,
oh,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
I
you.
was just gonna say, if we can step out of that matrix for a second, it's so liberating. Like, if you
Yeah,
can just think to yourself for just a second, like, maybe there isn't anything wrong with me,
yeah, yeah.
it's so liberating.
What do you think of, TLC has had some winners in the past.
The Learning
My
Channel.
600-pound life. What do you think about My 600-pound life? Like, when I watch that, I am like, it feels exploitive to me. I don't know. The
Hmm.
people don't look happy. And it's like,
Yeah.
I haven't watched a lot of it, so I can't judge the entire series. But what do you think of that narrative on TV?
I think it's a modern day sideshow. Um,
Right.
like with Dear Honey Boo Boo
Oh,
from back in like
yeah.
2010s. It was the same sort of concept. It was like a sideshow of people that are poor and people that are fat. Um, and and I think I've asked you before, like, what is the level of consent that goes into a reality show?
Yeah, I
For
mean, I think it depends. It depends on the production company. And I think for somebody who is maybe already on the fringes of society, all they probably are, the focus from the production is probably, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay $5,000 an episode for
mm,
27 seasons. And you're like, holy shit, that's probably a lot. I mean, that would be a lot of money to me. But I have seen that the allure of being on TV is just, it trumps everything. Like,
hmm
it's so, the production companies need to make these high stakes shows, and the consent is basically, do you want to be on this show? And hopefully the production companies paint an accurate picture of what they're going to be on, but they
hmm
may not. They may say, we just want to follow you around with your life, following your journey. And then you see it and it's like, oh my God, oh my
and
God.
like, and if you, I just televised humiliation is very interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not going to cut out the juicy bits that happen in this journey, especially something as vulnerable as like, um, we talk about health at any size, and um, it is possible to have healthy habits and be healthy at any sizes. But I think when it becomes difficult is when your mobility is significantly limited, or there's a really dysfunctional relationship with food and that kind of thing. So it's like, I think it speaks more to like the folks that are on my 600-pound life they need care, right?
Yeah,
And
love, support.
and and I wonder if it's through the show that they are able to access those things. Would they have access to that same level of medical care, counseling,
Ooh, good point.
all of that
Yeah,
stuff outside
yeah,
of the show, right? Because I
yeah.
think like um, we call it like the socioeconomic indicators of health, right? So very typically, people that are wealthier are healthier than folks that are poor, and that's for a whole bunch of different
Wow.
reasons. Access to food, like cheap food, is unhealthy, right? And that's what people have access to in food banks. Food banks do their best, and they're doing amazing work and getting better all the time. But like Mr. Noodles versus a Hello Fresh box, right? Like
Yeah.
so so I just wonder like how much of, again, like how much of this, I don't know, it feels a bit complicated to me, but how much of this show is like what people should be getting anyway,
Yeah.
privately, but they can only access through a TV show?
And in exchange, they're being exploited. So it's like they get the opportunity, but at what
Mhm.
cost? Because that is a really good point. It's kind of like what was that show? Intervention, where the
Mhm.
show pays for the rehab. Amazing opportunity because rehab is very expensive. But in exchange, you're on TV, and it's the lowest points for these people, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And you sort of sign that deal, and also, once you're on TV, you get that connection through social media. So hopefully, even if they're being exploited, maybe the bright side is that they are able to connect and find what they don't get from the production in the fans of the show, who
Mhm.
are like, I'm rooting for you. It doesn't look like you're going through a hard time, or it looks like you're going through a hard time. Let me support you. But
Mhm.
I, to be completely honest, I think a lot of lives are ruined because of reality shows.
Mhm.
Because it's really hard to prepare someone for it. Like I was talking to one of the casting directors of and producers of Canada's Drag Race, and the mental
Mhm.
health component that these girls go through is not something a human being can prepare for, because you go from being
Mhm.
regular to being exceptional overnight. You're thrust into this international arena of social media, and people stop seeing you as human and they just start judging
Mhm.
you. And I think because of social media, whereas when Survivor first started, there was no social media, so people were maybe famous for 15 minutes literally, and then we
Mhm.
forgot about them. But now, because of social media, they can just, it's like that hamster wheel. You're just thrown into it, you become a meme, you become whatever, and it might not ever go away. And I don't think you can prepare people for like fame and that kind of just being kind of thrown in there like that.
And you and your body are up for debate, right?
Yeah.
Like that's wild. And people obviously like have the anonymity of the internet. So like I never want to read the comments on anything about Lizzo, because it's 800 like 14-year-old boys who are like, that fat bitch, I don't want to bang her. So like it
Oh,
must be
love
so
those.
hard. Like all of a sudden you are up for other people's assessment and they don't treat you like a human being.
Yeah, exactly. It would, I hope, I don't want to experience that. The Canada's Drag Race really was like, you know what? If somebody wanted to do the Peter Bree show, I would probably sign up, but I don't think I would ever want to be in a competition show of any kind where I was rated and judged and then put on TV and
And it's
and
like
thrown in.
watching sports for like for femme folks. It's femme sports. So we're like, you went into this competition, you knew there would be a sewing challenge. You've known there's going to be a sewing challenge for 10 years. What is your excuse? And meanwhile, like, I can't sew a button on.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we take it very seriously. Oh, Drag Race. To wrap things up, I would love to hear some insight. You know, if somebody is listening and like me is new to this conversation, or is maybe fat and feeling like they're not sure where to find themselves in social media, what advice would you give?
I think first of all, like if you're listening and you're not fat or you're not a fat person, thank you so much because we need allies. Every group of folks that is looking for liberation um, needs allies, and I'm so grateful and thankful for that. I think um, as a fat person, especially if you're more isolated, um, you know, I remember growing up in a smaller city and I felt like the only fat person for miles. I think one of the best things you can do is honestly do get on Instagram. There are folks like the Fat Sex Therapist
Ooh.
that you can follow. There's Ashley Chubby Bunny. There is, if you really want to, you can follow Tess Holiday. You can follow Lizzo. There's just like this whole world of fat activists that are on Instagram with their bodies, with their partners in their communities. Tifia Grande. There's, you know, I think accessing a community of people that look like you, a community of people that can live the stories that you want for yourself is really empowering. And think about yourself in your context. And I hate using this analogy because I feel like it ages us so much, but you gotta unplug from the matrix and just think about like, how would I feel if I was not in the same context? Because if you were in a different culture, in a different time, your ideals of what your body should look like and what you should accomplish would be completely different.
Uh-huh. I love
And
it.
just open it up. You know, one day buffets will come back to us. Right now we're looking at like a metaphorical buffet. There is such a buffet of sexual options, of romantic options, of life options for you. Like there are difficult things, but there are so many reasons to be optimistic and hopeful. And a big part of that is leaning on each other. And also educate yourselves. Fearing the Black Body, or Fear the Black Body, is one of the best books I've read. There's also Lindy West, who is the writer of the book Shrill, which is the show A.D. Bryant's on
Oh, yes, I've
Hulu.
seen that. Yeah.
Again, just like more stories, and be compassionate towards yourself and other people.
I love that. Thank you so much for giving me more of your time, Lauren.
You can have all my time.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll interview again in 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
And I'll honestly, thank you so much for coming back. And I can't wait to share this. I'm so I keep like looking, I'm like, is it recording? And it is. It's such a great conversation, and I'm really eager to put it out there and see what people think. And I want to have you back, I'm sure, again, like just to keep the conversation going. And as stories emerge in pop culture that I think are worth coming back to, I think, you know, one of the gifts that this podcast has given me is, you know, somebody like you has been in my life for years that I've always loved. And now I'm like a deeper understanding of you and your experience, and it makes me love you even more. And I think to be able to share that with people in this format is so great. And I now feel like I have like a not a Rolodex, but like I feel so lucky to have people like you that I can talk to and learn, but also, you know, just a great fun conversation. And I think that's what changes people, is engaging in conversations that are maybe uncomfortable, but make you feel good at the end because you know the human being on the other side. So thank you, honey.
Oh, I love you, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I will talk to you really soon.
Okay.
Bye, honey.
Bye.
See you. Have a great week.